Hi, welcome to the Battleship New Jersey CPO Exhibit. I'm Senior Chief Jason Baldwin, and I'd like to welcome you today to our beloved CPO Exhibit. The exhibit was commissioned in 2016. It was made for chiefs, by chiefs. It took about 8 months to develop what you're going to see today. Amongst our displays here at the CPO Exhibit are notable Chief Petty Officers. Here we have Master Chief Bashir, was the first African-American master diver in the United States Navy. We also have Chief Petty Officer John Henry Turpin. Chief Turpin was the first African-American Chief Petty Officer. We also have Chief Petty Officer Bob Feller. Bob Feller put his Major League Baseball career on hold to serve in combat during World War II as a gun captain. We have Chief Petty Officer Chris Kyle. He's the highest kill rate of any American sniper in history. We have Master Chief Anna Durvotanian, who is the first female Master Chief Petty Officer. We have here Chief Petty Officer Linda Oldhorn Purdy, who is from the Crow Nation, one of the first Native American Chief Petty Officers. Of course, we have our youngest Chief Petty Officer, Diego Enrique Santiago. He was battling lung cancer terminally, and his biggest wish was to become a Chief Petty Officer, so he was pinned and sadly passed away in 2006. And we have Chief Petty Officer Loretta Perfectus Walsh, who was the first female Chief Petty Officer, native of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She's buried nearby in St. Patrick's Cemetery in Holy Farm.
Hi, welcome to the Battleship New Jersey. Again, we're in the CPO Exhibit. I'm Master Chief Josh Mangum. Here we have our panel on Loretta Perfectus Walsh. So she was a Naval Reservist. She was the first woman to enlist in the Navy and was the first to enlist in a non-nurse occupation. On this panel, you'll see some younger photos of her. You'll see 2 local Senior Chief Petty Officers who are performing a wreath-laying memorial ceremony at the cemetery where she's buried in Oliphant, PA. You also will see her enlistment contract, and we actually have some of the first models for Navy female enlisted uniforms. Here we have the rating badge, the bosun knot, and the service stripes, all from the same set, from the same time period.
Another aspect of the Big J CPO Exhibit, in the Division Chief's office, we have a young sailor who's getting guidance from Chief Petty Officer. We also have the Egg Division, and inside the Division Chief's office there is a portrait of ETC Michael Wayne Gorczynski. Chief Gorczynski was serving aboard the USS New Jersey in 1980. Chief Gorczynski was killed during the barracks bombings on October 23rd, 1983.
One of the things we do here on the Battleship New Jersey as part of the CPO Heritage Academy is every year the selectees perform a ceremony and a memorial to POWs, to fallen soldiers, sailors, heroes, people who've affected the Navy in a great way. Senior Chief Shannon Kent is pictured here. This mural was done by local artist Marcus Monteros. She is CTIC, who was posthumously promoted to Senior Chief Petty Officer in January 2019. She was killed in Manbij, Syria during a bombing. Her funeral was in DC. It was attended by over 3,000 Chief Petty Officers and officers in the Navy. Her impact was felt both at the deck plates by people she served with, as well as she has impacted future generations. We're honored to have her in the Chief Petty Officer exhibit.
In this part of the exhibit we have the CPO cap devices from 1893 to the present. As we can see, throughout history, the evolution of the Chief Petty Officer cap device has changed pretty dramatically. The original cap device for Chief Petty Officers was nothing more than a naval gilt button. We originally have some of the wire rope wound chains around the fouled anchor, different variations of USN, all the way to our present Senior Chief anchors, both the mid-shank and high shank, and a United States Navy Reserve uniform button.
Right below the history of the cap devices is the CPO cutlass portion of the exhibit. Within there we have a description of the cutlass, and one of the interesting things here is you see the female CPO cutlass was donated by Senior Chief HMCS Sherry Snaza, who was married to Greg Snaza, who's the CMC out of Norfolk, and who passed away a few years prior to our establishing the exhibit. You'll actually see a picture of the Snaza family, which we put in there. We wanted to honor Greg and Sherry, 1 for their service, 2 in his memory, and 3 because she was donated a lot of uniform items to our exhibit. So now you see HMCS Sherry Snaz's dinner dress blue CPO female uniform. This is actually her ribbon rack, her warfare devices, her cummerbund, top to bottom. This is her uniform, and of course she has a combination cover, which a lot of our female chief petty officers and female sailors who served for more than 5-10 years had a lot of honor wearing that cover, and so we made sure we had that here in the exhibit as well.
Amongst the uniforms we have displayed here in the Chief Petty Officers exhibit is a pair of aviation winter grades from World War II. During World War II, due to the high volume of qualified personnel that were needed for the war effort, there were two types of Chief Petty Officers. One was acting Chief Petty Officers, and the other ones were permanent appointments. Aviation Machinist Mate John Carrick was actually a PBY flight engineer, and he was a temporary appointed chief due to his background in aviation prior to the war.
Okay, welcome to the Wall of Honor within the Chief Petty Officer Exhibit Mess. So the Wall of Honor, it covers Chief Petty Officers who have been awarded the Medal of Honor since 1898 to present. There are the 4 Navy divers who rescued the sailors from the Squalus. There's Floyd Bennett Field in New York is named after him, who performed the flight to the North Pole for the first time. So there are many ships named for Chief Petty Officers, the most famous obviously the USS Chief. There's also the USS Stetham, McFall, John Fenn, James E. Williams, the Hill, the Truett, and of course the Delbert Black.
When we first designed the CPO exhibit here on the Battleship New Jersey, we wanted to go with the timeline of the Chief Petty Officer from the inception of the Chief Petty Officer rank, starting with 1893 with Navy Regulation Circular Number 1, through the early war periods that encompass the first time Chief Petty Officers went to war in 1898 during the Spanish-American War, through the interwar periods of 1913 through the 1922, and again the mid-20s up until World War II, and World War II to present.
Here in front of you now we have the USS Squalus, as well as a tribute to our Navy divers. You'll see on the left we have a representative helmet that Carl Bashir would have worn. We also have a detailed history there about the challenges, both professional, racial, and personal, that he faced throughout his life. An honor to have him represented here in our exhibit. Center in the panel is the USS Squalus. We mentioned it during the Wall of Honor. As you'll get close-ups, you'll see the dive bell that they actually had to go down in, 2 men at a time, to rescue upwards of 23 sailors from this submarine. They went up and down over 20 hours, alternating between each other, and as a result were awarded the Medal of Honor. And in another special part of our exhibit here is Master Diver Rebecca Jones. She's one of the first female Master Divers and graduated top of her class in dive school. So she sent us her dive boots, her coin, her flippers, her dive suit and goggles, and her dive knife, as well as a t-shirt from her mess and her retirement ceremony program.
One of our displays here at the exhibit is our CPO charge book. Now the charge book is here on display, and any Chief Petty Officer, past or present, can sign the charge book while visiting the exhibit. On the front of the vessel, we have here our CPO exhibit coin, which is made from teak from the decking of the Battleship New Jersey, along with our encampment coin and inaugural exhibit coin. As we see inside the vessel, there are 2 frame numbers that are on the coin, one of which is the actual space that the exhibit is in, and the other is the actual Chief's Mess on the Battleship New Jersey.
This concludes your tour of the Battleship New Jersey CPO exhibit. We hope that you learned something, that you got to see what the power of the mess coming together can do in a very short amount of time, and that you got in touch with some of our legacy, some of our heritage, as it feeds our future. The exhibit was built by CPOs and Chief Selects at a request of the battleship's director. And those relationships that were built over time with the ship and with the local messes is what has established this event that you're a part of today. On average, we have around 300 active duty FTS and CELRES chiefs on board for this event every year, and around 70 Chief Selects. And they all get to visit the ship, stay overnight, and tour it, and get to handle the actual artifacts in the exhibit, as well as perform battle stations and functions around the ship. So we hope you enjoyed the tour, and we appreciate you being here, and congrats on your selection as Chief Petty Officer.